Hello, everyone, and welcome. Hello, Tucker. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Um, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Shay Little, the director of Big Medium. Thank you all for joining us for Coffee Chats. Today we have W. Tucker, friend, artist, and wonderful person to talk with. So,
Thank you.
yeah, let's jump in. I guess start with your own words about yourself, whatever you want to say, and kind of how you got to where you are as an artist.
Um, so I'll give you the historical Reader's Digest. Born in North Carolina, military dad, moved around the South a lot. Ended up in Hawaii and then back in Virginia, finishing high school and stuff. And went away to college and landed in New York. Finished school in New York with a degree in drama, which did me a lot of good. But then I worked on some jobs and ended up in LA. And I guess the big relevance of this part of the story is that I landed in a house where one of the prior roommates had left a drafting table, a bunch of pretty nice drawing paper and oil and chalk pastels. And being at the time, the starving actor with a lot of time on my hands, I just started fooling around with it. And I had a pal that I did some acting classes with I kind of give her a bit of credit for me continuing to do it because she was just fun to talk to about the work and what I was doing. I was working with colors and shapes and eventually some figurative stuff. And she was just enthusiastic and supportive. And that was at the time really helpful. Somewhere a couple years into doing it, another friend had a boyfriend who was managing a parachute store. And Parachute was a kind of trendy store in the 80s in New York, and they opened a store in Beverly Hills. And so she said her boyfriend was managing it. Did I want to do a show? And of course, knowing absolutely nothing about doing a show, I said, sure, that sounded good to me. So I got work framed and, it was a really fun, lovely show and sold a bunch of pieces, which kind of shocked me and gave me this idea that I could actually, I liked what I was doing. I felt I was kind of decent at it and I felt I was getting better at it. And it made me think that it was something that I could do. Acting was starting to get hard and weigh on me, and auditioning was not fun after a while. And so that show also gave me the false hope a little bit that selling artwork was kind of easy. So that's like the beginning story of it.
Did your work then in your earlier shows, and I know for most artists you progress and evolve your practice, but do you see anything back then in your early work that translates over to the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I did a show a bunch of years ago at Texas State, and I had to do a talk where I needed a decent slideshow. And I went back to really early work to kind of talk about exactly that, how the work had progressed over time. And what shocked me is that there was a through line in the work. The work back then was a lot denser. I was using oil and chalk pastels a lot back then, but eventually within a couple of years, I was using oil sticks and really thick oil sticks and not layer like thick, but just dense work. But the characters that were evolving then, even though they've become more childlike over time, I can look back and see a distinct through line from that work to the work I'm doing now. I think a couple years into it was the, what we talked a little bit about the other day, the shift to the left-hand work. I think those characters, the energy of them stayed. The energy that was there in the old pieces kind of is a through line. And then the characters just kind of shifted as they became more and more childlike.
When did you shift to the left-hand approach?
I had been working for maybe 4 or 5 years, and 4 years maybe. And all these things happily, it's funny, I realize this as I'm saying it, all these things come from friends, which is kind of lovely. I had met a woman, Lucia Capacchione, who had written, was I don't know if I have this totally right, but a therapist, child psychologist who had done a lot of work with left and right hand writing and drawing. And she'd written a number of books at the time. And she was doing a weekend seminar and asked me if I was interested. And I said, yeah, but I'm, again, not to be redundant, but I am the starving artist who has no money. So she said, come and hand out pencils and paper and you can do the weekend. So it was a pretty big revelation. It was mostly, it was all dialoguing. It was all writing back and forth. And I will remind folks out there listening that this was California. So it was, a little woo-woo, but it was really, I couldn't tell at first if I was making this stuff up as I wrote stuff, left hand, right hand, what they were saying to each other. But eventually I just decided to believe it. And so it was really a great weekend. And what it kicked off for me is going back to my studio, and probably within the next couple of weeks, I was starting to toy with using my left hand to do work. And how memories serve us and don't serve us. I have this memory that the time between starting with my left hand and going fully to my left hand was like a year. I think it was more like 3 years, again, something like that, where I would do work with both hands. And then eventually I started doing pieces with just my left hand, and then I would go back and forth a bit. And, it's kind of a cliche in my head now, but what came up for me was that the work with my right hand was interesting and okay, but it was and kindly I use this word, but it was kind of unfortunate in the sense that it had no, to me, it had no life. And what I was seeing in the work that was happening with my left hand was that it was alive. It was really, it felt honest. So it felt like a really natural, honest voice coming out of me. And, for whatever it was worth at the time, and it was not like a big conscious decision, but I just thought, I'm going to nurture this voice. And so probably within the next year or two, I had given up using my right hand and just focused using my left hand. And I think I said to you the other day, which I said, part of me feels like I'm giving up these life secrets when I'm saying this stuff, but it's just true, is that as I started doing that work more and more and noticing kids' work more and more, I felt like the closer I got to what a kid was doing, the happier I was with the work. And I also mentioned to you the other day that I had found a drawing of a kid's drawing that had done something like 4 or 5 legs. on a person, and I tried to rip it off. So I also learned that I really needed to listen to what was coming out of me as opposed to trying to borrow stuff. It just, I feel there are artists out there who can have a picture in their head and just do a beautiful painting or drawing or sculpture from it. That was not my strength. And happily, I learned that early on, that trusting this other way for me made sense.
Yeah, that idea that you talked about of like the closer you got to emulating a child's approach to mark making, the happier you were with the work. You know, I come back to the idea of like, how do you maintain that mindset, but also the inability to use your left hand to do that trained motion, that trained action of the hand. How have you tried to keep yourself from just learning skills with your left hand and ingraining these new techniques into your mark making so that you still have that closeness to awkwardness and like inability to
I have gotten better with my left hand. It's just sort of inevitable, but I do a number of things. I hold whatever I'm working with, whether it's a paintbrush or a pencil or oil stick. I hold it in more of an awkward way. So a normal way to hold it might be like this, and I might hold it like this, or I might actually turn it around and go like this. So it's constantly kind of devolving, moving away from it, getting better. And also again, and I think I mentioned this too, that I realized by mistake one day that I was holding a book cover and that I was working on, and I wanted to make another mark. And so I made the mark while I was holding it. So holding the book in the air made another a physical surface that wasn't flat, wasn't easy to work on. So I realized, oh, you can do that some too. So I started, grabbing a pencil, grabbing charcoal or something, and marking on a book cover, whatever I was working on, while I held it up in the air, and purposefully maybe moving it while I was doing, which, there was another part of me going, yo, whoa, I want to make this mark, and it's like, well, we're seeing what we're doing here. So I think I also have, there was a piece a long time ago that I did on wood, and I was working on a piece and I realized that in the middle of it, I was doing stuff that was really comfortable. And I was like, you can leave those teeth the way they are, or you can change them. It's up to you. You can go either way. But I felt like I was being really safe with the piece. And so the title of the piece ended up being All Tricks Aside. And that's what struck me during doing that specific piece was, if you want to, sometimes you can use these tricks that work for you. But the bigger part of the process is making the decision. Do you want to do that? Do you want to have this head be rounder than you would like it to be? Do you want these ears or something to fit this way? And then deciding yes or no, and most of the time it's no. And I, either scratch it out or cover it up or go back in another way to get it back to that place that I want it to be. And it's not a heavy-handed thing. It's not like I'm angry with myself if I don't hit that mark or go that direction. But it's also connected to me to this idea of, which came early on too in the work, was this idea of, which again sounds a little cliche, but no fear. just not having fear about making the mark, not having fear about covering something up, not having fear about, you know, taking an X-Acto blade to a book cover where you've done some, you think, really interesting, cool things, and just cutting part of that out. So yeah.
Yeah, I've had plenty of moments where I can't, like I'm a map freak and I love old maps and I just want to cut them up and do stuff, but at the same time I can't because I don't want to do the wrong thing. Yeah, ruin this like artifact that I cherish so much.
It's hard when it's stuff you really like. Steve Wyman has given me a couple books, kids books, that I have not yet been able to pull apart because a kid has worked in them. It's a storybook, but a kid has drawn some stuff in them, and it's really beautiful as it is, and I love those gifts that are given, those marks that are given, those patinas that are given on book covers or wood or whatever I happen to be working on. But this is one where I'm struggling with. It's so beautiful. I don't know if I'll ever work on it, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fear, I'd love for you to talk about your upcoming show in Houston. And yeah, we were talking about fears there, about the work you're showing, and it's I think it's a really interesting topic and conversation.
Yeah. So first part of December, I have a show with Franny Koelsch Gallery in Houston, and I'm showing work on different materials, which is not unusual for me, but I'm showing these postcards watercolor postcards that I work on. And usually what I do is, if I'm not in the studio during the day, I try and work every day. Doesn't always happen, but I do my best. And so if I'm not doing studio work, I'll work on these collages, just take 20 minutes or half an hour. And so I talked to Franny about showing these and sent her some images, and she was excited about doing it, which was good. I was happy about that. And but they are, I feel that my other work is, the through line in the other work a lot to me is, and we were chatting a little bit about this nature of how we move through life. Do we go kicking or screaming? Do we, you know, breathe? How do we do our day-to-day life? And that is an element that I feel is in my work. If, you know, on the surface, maybe not sometimes, but if you step a little below the surface, you'll see that. That's my feeling about it. And so there are elements of social issues, gun control, some things that are going on in our world, social injustice, and that's been in the work kind of for a long time, and the idea of violence and the violence we perpetuate on others and on ourselves as well. And these postcards are kind of a step beyond some of the work in terms of being, having more maybe racial elements, or I think I was describing a piece to you of, and this is more about male, female, but of a woman, where it's the bottom half of a woman, and it's from some fashion shoot, but it's kind of a rumply dress, and it's just the bottom half, and then there's of the woman, and there's a line across and some marks up top. And the piece is titled something like, I can't remember exactly, but how it feels to be half. And my feeling about it was, this is about just a person in general and how it feels to not be grounded in your body, not be centered, to have an off day or off week or off couple years. And then suddenly, as I'm going through these pieces, looking for ones to show Franny, I'm I'm struck by the idea that this could also mean what it might mean. If you're a woman, you're half of something. Like a man is a full being and a woman is half. And suddenly I was like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. And your comment, which I really thought was great when we chatted about this a little bit, was you were interested in me, kind of deciding to edit, and a little bit of deciding what people were going to think about it. And your comment, which I liked, was, they could not think that, or they could think 10 things worse than that, right. Which is really true. So, and you asked me if I was going to, if I felt I was going to edit them heavily. And I said, in the end, no. I said, right now I'm struggling with it, and I am editing some. And then we also talked about, the idea of cultural appropriation and what that means. And I'm in the space which is trying to understand a lot of this stuff. And whoever said it a while ago, it's time to listen. That's where I'm at, is listening and seeing what things mean to people. I am a white dude, and someone of color might look at some of my work and think, oh, this is, how are you doing that? Or why are you doing that? So I'm really interested in, I'm not interested in fighting for my right to do it per se. I'm more interested in hearing someone's thoughts and reasoning behind what they think, because I think it's not to be simplistic about it, but I think it's been a time to learn for a long time, and now it's even more. It's not like it hasn't been relevant for a long time, but it's super relevant now. So yeah, so that's those pieces are a little more out there in terms of what they're saying. And so yes, there's I have some fear around how people will respond to that. And I'm not going to let it stop me from showing it.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly aware of my feelings around it.
Right. There's one thing to have fear and recognize it, and then there's another thing to act on that fear.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a really important step, and you have some words on your website that are, asking the questions or posing the question of like, what's your role in this current new world we're experiencing, and what is the role of artists in general?
Right.
And we say this a lot in the office when things are busy, and we're just like, well, it's just art. No one's going to die because we didn't make art happen or help art happen.
Right.
But then in the exact same conversation or sentence, you have to say, but it is art, and we have to make sure it continues to happen because it's part of it. It is part of life, and the cultural dialogue needs it to help further it. And I'm struck by the pains that artists experience, and even the audience experience, when you can't have those conversations about art, because for whatever reason, many reasons, maybe the artist isn't present and the viewer has their opinions and wants to talk about it, or maybe they just don't want to talk about it. But I do think it is good of you to not let those fears keep your work from being shown, and trying to be open to that conversation, because I do think that we have to continue to communicate and step into a mess or make a mistake and talk about it and talk through it and be open to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do think that's the only way we're going to move forward at all. I mean, I won't, this was a longer story sort of when I told it to you, but the short version of it is, in California on a Sunday, a fellow used to come by our house, our apartment, and knock on the door, and he wanted to convert me to a certain religion. And my belief is that whatever makes you a better person is what matters. If that's a religion, if it's a whatever it is. So Sylvia kind of teased me afterwards because I had a long conversation with him, and she was like, "What were you doing? What was that about?" And Sylvia's my wife, by the way, whoever doesn't know. And she wasn't giving me a hard time. She just thought it was interesting. And I told him pretty quickly that I had very different beliefs than him. But I also felt that if he and I could not talk, even regardless of how much he wanted me to move a certain way or I wanted him to move a certain way, if we couldn't have that conversation, then we might as well quit. Because that's, the bigger things we often can't control out there in the world, politics and what's happening and stuff. We can scream and yell and throw things, but some of it's just going to happen no matter what we do. But the person across the street or in front of us, we can actually have an effect on, and they can have an effect on us. And I think connected to my work, some days I think I'm this 61-year-old dude who draws these little kids pictures, and what am I doing with my life? And the flip side of that coin to me is that in a really humble, I hope, and simplistic way, I hope that the work allows people to supports them in their life in some way, gives them a moment of peace, or a moment of, they see something sad in a piece and it makes them feel something about a family member that passed away, and so they have that emotion and get. So I'm hopeful in a really small, in some way, a small way, it's back to part of the conversation you were talking to that can happen in the work, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, you said one of the through lines is this idea of like how you go through life, kicking and screaming and fighting, or not that. Does your work espouse one of those, or is it looking at those different models of going through life, or are you trying to advocate for an approach to life?
No, it's a good question. I think in most of the work, I think Jean Claire, what's her Sightlines?
Yeah.
So she came to see a show before it opened at Grey Duck when I had a show with Jill there. And I think the word she used was melancholic. And she felt very sad around some of the words. And she made a point to say that she wasn't saying that in a derogatory way. It was just how some of the work made her feel. And I think that, I don't know, I thought about this before. I don't know if the work is autobiographical in a certain respect. I'm talking about what's going on in my life. I'm talking about what I see around me. There's a big black piece that you showed at the beginning with a guy kind of falling in a bird head. The title of that piece is Only Nature Can Save Him Now. And so I think my answer to the question is that I think both are in the pieces often. There's an element of someone attempting to breathe and sit and live and be a good person. And then there's some element of them not doing that in the piece. They might have a boxing glove on, which doesn't necessarily indicate anything except, am I fighting me? Am I fighting someone else? I had a show at Conduit Gallery a long time ago where I did a big black piece on the wall, a wall drawing that was probably, I don't know, 15 by 15 or something like that. And this fella came up to me at the opening and he said, you know, I really like your work, and I love the violence in your work. And I was like, violence? Wow, where is there violence in my work? And I'm standing in front of this piece and I look up and there's all these, I don't know, 5 or 6 birds with boxing gloves. And then there's these other people laying down. So it was not blood and gore, but there was some element of, you know, this struggle and this fight. So I think, not to be redundant, but I think the answer to that question is that both of those often live in a piece. I mean, I have some that are calmer and it's just someone, you know, there was one that you showed where a guy's sitting and there's this black thing above him and then yellow. And then it said he knew something about the light being through the darkness. So that's, you know, I didn't do that to be super literal, but I think there's some pretty literal commentary there.
Are any of the works self-autobiographical, but also self-portraits?
Probably. Probably. I don't purposefully do that, but I know some of them are. Sylvia has come into my studio at times and gone, hey, yeah, there you are. But I do have, in some of the older work that was more realistic and figurative, I have a couple pieces from back then where, you know, again, this is funny to me, but not knowing anything about anything, I would take a camera, because you used a regular camera at the time, just a little Polaroid camera, and I would take snapshots of myself. And so I would take snapshots going like this, or making, you know, just faces. And so I have some, and I still have them in the studio. I think I have some pieces that I did that are versions. I think I have 2 or 3 that are versions of me that are definitely self-portraits. I don't know if my skills were good enough for anyone to look at them and go, oh yeah, that's you, but they were at the time.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm thinking about it as like, even non-representational works can be self-portraits of your ideology or your emotion. Yeah, I think about myself and the idea, I think I sit on the side of going through life, trying to, not the path of least resistance, but a righteous path, a path that isn't trying to do good, it's not trying to do wrong, it's trying to find less resistance. But I certainly fight, fight my way. So you have to embody and accept the duality or the plurality of those different modes of handling life. Sometimes you just can't do it the way you want to do it. You just have to fight and suffer, and then look at yourself in the mirror and say, that sucked. Let's try not to do that again. Yeah. Well, it's a good break to let everyone know that you are welcome to ask questions. You can do it through the chat feature. You can also do it through the Q&A feature. Either one works well. And if y'all don't have questions, then Tucker and I will just keep going. So I did want to ask you about how, you kind of talked a little bit about it, but maybe explain further your thoughts and experience and how you show your art, like when you show it and how you show it. Maybe even how do you get into a gallery show if that's where you want to do it?
Well, right now, so I have 3 places I'm working with, Koelsch Gallery, Conduit Gallery, and Tayloe Piggott Gallery in Wyoming. And I've been working with Tayloe for 4 years now, I think, and the other galleries 16 years or so. I'm constantly putting stuff out there to other galleries. You know, obviously now it's kind of a weird time, but one thing that I found that's really helpful, and I fall off the wagon seriously for periods of time and then get back on, is to make it consistent. Meaning, if I'm sending out, and now it's I hate to say it's simple, but it is simple in a lot of ways, that you don't have to get, you know, before, a long time ago, I'm sending packets of slides out and, you know, having to get copies of those and everything. And now you just submit, you know, most people have you submit online. So I kind of have a set of work that I'm sending out for a period of time, and then I'll change that up. But making it consistent rather than, because I find that if I wait 6 months or a year goes by where I'm not really submitting work, then I really have to pick up this snowball and kind of push it up the hill, where if I'm consistently doing it, I have something ready to go. And maybe when I change up stuff, I don't change every image. I just pull stuff out that I think is, I like less at the time. So I'll add that in. But so I'm pretty consistent in terms of putting stuff out. I also do a thing where, this is another secret that it's not really a secret, but I don't know, maybe if everybody's doing it, it'll be really fun for galleries, is that usually after I've submitted work, I'll wait 2 months or something, and then I'll send an envelope with 2 postcards in it. And one postcard has a drawing on front and has a note that says, you know, I submitted a couple months ago. I wanted just to check in and see if you had time to look at the work and what you thought. Thank you for your time, kind of stuff. And then the other postcard is back to myself, and I put stamps on it. So I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible. And so on the back of that, and there's another drawing on the front of it, and on the back of that is a checklist. And the checklist is received portfolio, did not receive portfolio, would love to speak to you, not right for us at the moment, doesn't fit our gallery, and then a space for other. And this is a really important thing to do, is if you're sending out a couple at a time, be sure you initial the corner of the postcard so you know what gallery it is. Because you're going to get the postcard and not know who it came from if you don't do that, which I've done in the past. But I have to say that it's a really good way. Every gallery I've sent it to has returned it one way or the other, either in a positive way or a no thank you, or they've called me from it. The gallery in Wyoming, I think I've been in touch with them for a bunch of years, just because Tayloe said she kind of wanted to get people used to the work she was showing and maybe interject my work slowly. But I got an email back from them at one point saying that I wasn't going to get the postcards back and they wanted to talk to me. So that was really positive. Everyone sent them back, and what's good about it is you get a response. So for all the time we're sitting around, you know, not knowing what someone thought about the work, even if you get a no, it's still like, oh, I got something. So
I mean, I think that's an awesome secret and an awesome one to share. It's such a great way of making it easy and giving a gallery an easy way to just to say yes, no, maybe so, and
yeah,
and just communicate. It's all about communication. Jade Walker has a question. Will you talk about color choices? I love the way pink works into your pieces, and I wonder what fuels those choices.
Thanks, Jade. You know, I was thinking about this idea of inspiration coming into this, and I had a conversation with my niece Adrienne one time where, well, with a couple of people, and I said something about how I don't believe in inspiration, and I asked Adrienne at the end of the conversation whether it was she thought that was I forgot what word I used, but sort of kind of had an attitude about it. And she said yes, a little bit. But I bring it up because I think I'm inspired by materials more than sitting. I don't like wait to get inspired to sit down and work. I feel inspired sometimes when I work, but that's not the point to me. I feel more like a kind of worker who sits down and works, but I'm inspired by materials. And so back to the color thing is, I see stuff out there that really grabs me. There was a green that I saw in Marfa, in one of the spaces there that just floored me. And so I've done a lot of work with that green. The pink actually comes from, I do some work with Blue Way, who's a fine woodworker in town and does a lot of, he's a kind of a master of many things. And so I work with him sometimes just construction wise, doing different things. And we were tearing out a kid's bedroom in town, little girl's room, building a big area for her to sit and hang out up kind of high. And the wall we had to tear out was a pink wall. And so as I'm throwing this wood out this window, I'm sneaking outside. Blue doesn't care, but I'm sneaking outside to take a piece of this drywall because this pink is like killing me. It's so beautiful. So I take the pink home, I take it to the paint company and have them make me a can. So I use a lot of black and white in my work, but I'm also really drawn to these really kind of shocking, the green's not a shocking color, but the pink certainly is pretty vibrant. It's not shocking pink, but anyway, so I think that they're colors that just wake me up and draw me in and kind of, you know, I think like a lot of artists think they kind of say, use me. So.
Shocked that you don't believe in inspiration, but we'll come back to that. So I've been to your studio and I'm also shocked that you don't have piles and piles of, like, I accept that I'm a hoarder. I have piles and piles of stuff that someday will be made into art. And I've kind of stopped accumulating because I've kind of stopped making art. I will get back to it at some point, but you don't have like huge piles of wood and book covers that I've seen. Are you hiding it, or are you really selective about what you pick up and bring to the studio?
I do have a bunch of book covers, and they are, I probably have a couple hundred. They're packaged up and wrapped up in plastic and in those racks. And some are just kind of stacked up that I can pull from. So that's probably what I have the most of. I am incredibly selective at this point. And part of that is that my studio is only so big. Blue, one of the pieces you showed early on, that was a piece of wood that had little blue X's on it and a person standing in a boat. Again, Blue and I were working on a job and we were hanging up a really big piece of artwork downtown. And the box was probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it was longer than his van. So it was 14 or 16 feet long. If I could have, the inside of that box, that whole piece of wood had these little blue X's all over it. And again, it was another thing that was like, you know, holy crap, that's really stunning. And Blue saw me looking at it and he said, do you want it? I said, yeah, but I can't take it all, because I knew sitting it, you know, by my studio outside, it was just going to get destroyed. So he took a saw and cut 2 pieces off for me. So that was something I felt I could handle. So when I see stuff out, it's a real moment of discussion in my head about how badly do you want that, and are you willing to, you know, move it around. And you know, also I have a big piece in the studio that's probably 5.5 feet by 6.5 feet, and it's an old, a woman gave it to me at a job. I was working a catering job out in California, and a woman said, hey, we'd worked at her house a lot. She has tons of artwork. And she said, we just got this artwork from Africa, and there's this great box. Do you want it? So I ended up dragging this box out on my back and putting it on the roof of my car and strapping it down and taking it home that night. So it's a piece that I showed at Texas State and is still in my studio. So every time I need to get to certain things, which I don't need to do very often, which is fortunate, I have to lift the piece up on my back and drag it somewhere and put it down. So I don't, again, it's hard because I don't want that to stop me from working on materials, which kind of makes me cranky at times, because every once in a while I go, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. I'm like, but why? That's really a great piece of work. So, and I have, what I usually do is I bring bits and pieces of wood into the studio, and I don't have any kind of rule about it, but I'm going to work on them in the next couple months. Because 1, I picked them up because I like them, and 2, I don't want them sitting around just kind of collecting dust and getting stacked up with other pieces. So if I little more long-winded answer to that question is that if I had more space, I would have more stuff. So I also know about myself that, and my younger brother is the same way, where if there's too much visual clutter, we get nutty. Our house is really sparse here. And it's the same with my studio. My studio's got a lot of stuff going on in it, but my painting area, even though it has a lot of materials, I have a lot of materials around me. I sit on the ground and I sit on my knees and work, but that area is really clean and really neat. And part of that is visually, it's what I want. And also I don't want to look for things to work with. I want to know where they are when I want them. So that's part of that for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, back to inspiration.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on inspiration.
Well, I think generally inspiration is a good thing. I think that the problem sometimes with inspiration is when you have to wait for inspiration to do work. There's this, you know, I wrote this after 8 or 10 years of having this book. I finally wrote this woman and just told her how great I thought it was and how much I use it. And I feel like I should get some money for her sales on the books now, but it's called One Continuous Mistake by a woman, Gail Shearer. And in the book, this is badly paraphrased, but she basically says she felt like the only way she could fail at writing, at being a writer who wrote every day, being the woman at that point who wrote a haiku a day, was to not show up. So her idea was too that at the time she had her cup of tea, she put out her writing materials, which was not a computer at the time, it was a pencil and paper. And she would do it 20 minutes a day. It may turn into 5 hours a day, but it might just be 20 minutes. And if she did the 20 minutes, she felt like she had accomplished, she had shown up, whether she wrote anything or not. So that's the way I approach it. And excuse me, it also makes me think of this, another friend who is a playwright, this fellow, Stephen Dietz, who, and again, this is my impression from our conversations, is that he sees himself as a craftsman, as a worker. And so he gets up, I don't know what time, 5:30 in the morning, makes coffee, goes out to his studio and he starts writing. And that's kind of the way I like to see myself, is that I just, and I don't want this to sound like simplistic or whatever, but I'm not saying I sit down and do great work every day, but I try and sit down and work every day. And to me, like I said, I might be inspired while I'm working. I also might be inspired by the materials I'm working on. But I think the kind of catch for me is that I need to feel that to sit down to work, or I need to wait for those flowers to bloom in my head before I can actually put something down. So I don't, and hopefully I don't mean to be dissing anyone who feels that, because I also know people who, I knew a painter in California that when she would do a show, she would not work for months, 2, 3, 4 months. And then she would, for a month, she would work almost 24/7. And I think she would get that adrenaline, she would get inspired, and she would do the work. So maybe that's somewhere where that fits for someone, but it never really worked for me. So sorry if I insulted anyone.
Well, I'll retract my shock and awe. That's all.
Okay. No. No,
I think that is it's different for everyone, as we all know, but it is a practice, right? We talk a lot about artistic practice, and not necessarily the best terminology, but this really is something that you do. You need to do it and practice it. And I often relate it to sports or exercising. These are muscles that you're developing.
Yeah, sure.
You don't use them, they go away. And if you use them a lot, then you get muscle memory and you get the ability to do things without necessarily having to work really hard at it, but you just have to keep working at it. So yeah, an inspiration can weave in and out of that. But
yeah. I mean, I have, sort of, they're not set in stone, but I have certain rituals. I mean, I sit down, I have mantras that work for me. I often dedicate the work that just, I don't know if it does anything in the end, but it feels like it sort of opens a space for me to be available. So, in the end, it's sort of back to that idea of being a good person and whatever takes you to that place. It's the same with artwork to me. I mean, I think that, coming towards this conversation, one of the things I thought about in terms of one of the biggest aspects of being an artist and continuing to be an artist to me, and was important to me at the beginning, was to find an honest voice, to find the voice that's coming out of you. And that might shift and change over time. But, I look at, thinking about people in school, learning the skills of painting and all that kind of stuff, I think are really relevant and really important. And at the same time, I think it's just as important to be looking at what's true for you and what's coming out of you.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 minutes left, and we can go a little long if you want to stick around. But we have one last question from Valerie Chassanet, and she's asking, can you talk about your inner child? And you are talking about show up and do the work, but what about play?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the adult and the child aspect of my work, is that the child part of me is always excited to get to work and to draw. The adult part maybe is the part that structures it for me, brings me to that place, gets me to sit down, helps me do all these other things that allows me to do it, like do laundry, buy groceries, make food, get the car fixed and stuff like that. Because those are also, which is, I like, again, that one continuous mistake book really strikes me, is that she talks about that a lot, just how these things help us do our work. So yeah, I have for the longest time, when I started using my left hand, all of the work gets signed with two names, and one is Tucker, and the other is Abert, A-B-E-R-T. And during that workshop with that woman, Lucia, that's actually the name that came out when I was writing a name for my left hand. And so when I started doing work with my left hand, I started signing everything Tucker and Abert, because I think that it is, I think, you know, that right brain, left hand does most of the work. I think the left brain, right hand, that part comes in every once in a while with like balance and stuff like that. But I think play is a big element of creating the work. It's a big part of sitting down and staying loose. It's a big part of not judging too much or at all if possible. It's a big part of, you know, no fear, because kids often, there's not much fear there in a lot of respects. So that kind of moves me forward in that direction too. So yeah, I mean, I think that the whole studio for me is, I feel really lucky. It's like essentially a big playground for me. So I don't know if that answers that, but.
Well, this has been lovely. And yeah, and I look forward to our next conversation. I'd love to keep talking with you.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap it up. So thank you all for joining us, especially you, Tucker, for making time to speak with us and sharing all your secrets.
Yeah.
Wonderful secrets.
Thanks, Shay, and thanks everybody who showed up. I appreciate you listening.
Yeah, everyone stay safe and healthy and wear a mask.
Okay. All right, Shay, take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye.